I really like Molten Core, Blackwing Lair, and BRD, and it's because every group makes their own culture on how they do it. Now, in my case, of course, normally I end up doing these places the same way every time because there's a little bit of a culture with the group of people I've played with over the years as to how we approach these dungeons. And what I mean by that is which packs you do and don't skip, what strategies you do and don't do on certain bosses. For example, there's a lot of variance on how people actually set their tanks up on Firemaw, even though there is not really that much variance in how people do it at the highest levels of gameplay. Or another thing in Blackwing Lair is which tech packs do you skip? And how do you handle the threat drops on the big alligator guy packs? The Draconids, I think is their name. They have halberds. You know what I mean. There's three of them. They suck. You can have priests do mind vision and reset them if you're a real psycho. Nothing wrong with that if you do it. It's just a lot of bullshit. You need that Blade of Eternal Darkness from Maradon. Or in Molten Core, where do you pull the core hounds? Do you skip any of the Molten Giants? Do you kill destroyers or giants first? I mean, giants have a threat drop, but destroyers do an AoE stun. It kind of depends on how much you trust your tanks to make threat, and also how much you trust your healers to heal everybody. Also, if your raid's better at positioning, the AoE stuns aren't a big threat to your raid group. And if their raid's very bad at positioning and likes to ass pull shit, then AoE stuns can be really quite the hassle. How have your groups handled lava packs? Do your tanks take turns using free action potions to ensure it always goes smoothly? Or have you been in groups where the tanks kind of suck on those and you've came up with your own personal strategies to not die from the AoE stuns and the fire blossom on the lava packs? Now, a lot of these things are a pain in the ass, but it is interesting how not everybody handles this stuff in the exact same way. And that adds a little bit of spice to doing these dungeons, in my opinion. But it's not really very easy to intentionally design a dungeon that way, in my opinion. It would be very, very, very hard to predict that players will see these things and come up with a variety of strategies, and that one strategy won't just totally dominate. One of the examples of this would be Ragnaros. Originally, at the very start of 2019, a lot of people tried to run out when he would do the smash and do a threat drop. And that was mostly because people didn't understand how it worked. They didn't realize that basically it was going to select three players and send them flying, and it was going to clear everyone's threat. And since it's only three players and you theoretically want to keep the tanks in anyways, you might as well just keep everybody in and have them DPS and have them be careful with their threat right when the reset happens. So over time, everyone converged on one strategy for Rag, which is that you just watch your own threat for a few seconds after the reset. And if you get knocked away, you can intercept if you're a warrior, and your parse can just get screwed if you're anybody else. That'd be an example of over time, everybody did the same thing. When it came to handling tech packs, lava packs, which giants you do and don't skip? When do you pull core hounds? How do you handle Gar's ads? These are things that for some reason haven't all converged on the same strategy. And even things such as how do you do Major Domo varies a lot between groups. There's plenty of groups that would consider themselves speedrunners that wouldn't stack up all the mobs and AoE them. It's interesting stuff. And I don't think it's very easy to design these kinds of things into a game. I'm worried we're going to lose some of that as Season of Discovery goes on. It'd be really easy to crank the dials up on how hard things hit and kind of force players to find out what is the dominant strategy. For a lot of things, I actually don't think that's a huge issue. I don't think it's an enormous problem if everybody does fights the same way. But I do think we lose a little when you don't feel like you've learned how your group does something. Have you ever had somebody new come into a raid group and they didn't do super hot the first time? And maybe somebody who's positive in your group will say, well, it's a new group and they're probably getting acclimated to the way we do things. I think that's kind of cool, but it expands out in a lot of ways. It's not just about the anxiety of a new group and trying to see if anyone does something weird. When all the strats collapse into being exactly one way, you lose a little bit of that. I think it makes it a little bit less of a personal experience. And when it comes to doing BRD with your friends to farm their prebis at the start of phases, there's going to be a whole lot of differences with this. You're going to notice that pugging BRD, you can have some really dumb shit happen, and it'll be super frustrating. If you don't have a lot of buddies, it'll be different every time you do it. People will find ingenious ways to get your group killed. It's going to absolutely blow your mind. They're going to ass pull patrols that move 1 mile an hour. They're going to stack the destroyer Ellies in the middle of your group and then be surprised when the 800 damage AoE manages to overwhelm your healer. And perhaps this is a really good one. You'll have a new tank, and they're going to find a brand new path to bring you through the dungeon to ensure that BRD takes 4 hours to clear. And that will suck, but it will make it so that way once you have some guys you trust that you play with and you find out the right way to do it, the right path, the one where you guys never make a mistake when you do it that way and you're all in sync, it'll make it feel really satisfying. It'll make it so if you're farming for things like the chest mail gear, which I don't think is going to exist anymore, but you know what I mean, or Hand of Justice, or Iron Foe if for some reason they make it good, which I doubt they will. It'll make it special. It'll make it feel like you've built something with the people you play with that is rather unique. If you went and joined a brand new guild that was maybe higher performers than your guild and you tried to go into a BRD with 4 strangers in it, most likely it wouldn't go as smooth even if these players were all individually better because you just wouldn't all be on the same page, and that's really kind of cool. For the same thing with like Dire Maul East jump runs, it's pretty often that a warrior or whatever else and their healer partner, if they're doing duos for this, they'll kind of build a unique bond with each other and they know how to really slam through the dungeon super efficiently. And it'll feel like they can read each other's minds a little bit and they'll push it to the limits to go faster and faster, even when there's no incentive. And then things will go wrong. And then they'll get a sense for how the other player reacts. Maybe you had a 2v2 arena partner way back in the day, like 10 years ago when you were a kid. And one day, one of you wasn't able to get in Ventrilo when you're doing arena. And perhaps this even happened in threes, if you played a whole bunch of threes with 2 other guys. And it was like you could just read their fucking mind. You wouldn't ever need to ask for the CCs. They would just do it. You'd get dispelled, or you would do the dispel at the right times. And not to say that you're playing perfectly, but to say that you're playing very predictably to your partner, and then the match ends and you're able to type to each other about, I think we did this wrong, and it's not about technique, it's about, we had the wrong strategy. You did what I thought you would do, but maybe we should approach this in a different way. It's a very strange connection, something that most games I don't think can give you. If you played Counter-Strike, for example, or maybe Overwatch with friends, you most likely haven't ever built this kind of sense with the other people you play with, where you can read their minds, unless you have somebody that always like baits your team and never goes in. Or if you have a friend in League of Legends or Dota that just reliably feeds. I think some of that is those games are super highly competitive and it really brings technique to the forefront. And WoW is a very, very easy game and it's super slow paced. I hope we don't keep on seeing the game get harder and harder. I really want Molten Core and BWL to feel like it did in 2019. I'd really love to have there be basically no changes. Maybe just make it a 20-man raid with the same stats as 40-man. I think that'd be pretty fun. I think it'd be more fun than whatever they're going to have in store for us. But maybe we'll get lucky because it would be pretty easy for them to do minimal changes.